Hello, it's Mike Owens, Big O's Moto, making two strokes great again. Don't you think it's way past due we put an engine back together? Well, how about we start working on that today? But first, let's cue the music. Be back in a moment. All right, how's everybody doing out today? Beautiful day, beautiful day. Hope everybody's doing all right. This is Mike Owens, Big O's Moto. We're back uh, for another episode. Today we're gonna try to start getting his engine back together. Got all my parts in. Got my cylinder and crank back from Texas. It's all ready to go. And looks like we're gonna do surgery. Before we get into that is the update on the crank. What took so long, what took nearly 3 months is the the rod that I sent from Pro X. And by the way, Pro X is made in Japan. It's a company out of the Netherlands. So if you buy Pro X parts, they are equivalent to Honda OEM parts. Only thing is, it just won't have the Honda OEM name on it. That's not a big thing, but it's the same thing. It's just a little cheaper than the OEM stuff because it has Pro X and not Honda. Kenny called me a couple month or two ago and says, "Hey man, this is the wrong rod for the crank." And I didn't know what it mean. He said, "Did you order a 2002 crank?" I said, "Yes, that's what I ordered. I specifically ordered that." He said, "Well, the measurements are off." And he says, "This is a 2001 crank." I said, "Do what?" Yeah. He didn't understand, and I didn't understand why a 2001 crank was in a 2002 bike. And you think, well, what's the difference? As we know, it's just like cars. Companies change certain specifications every few years, and they change it, so they have to make changes in the blueprints, and make changes in the parts, make changes in the production of the parts, jigs, and all that stuff. Give an example: Honda CR250 from '98 to 2001 had its own engine components. From 2002 to 2007, which was the last R&D that was put into two strokes, the bike changed again, which come out with the radio control, or we call it the RC valve, or Ricky Carmichael valve, but it's cables that operate the power valve. That was the change of the last generation two strokes. But what he told me was this 2002 crank was a millimeter thicker up here on this material here was a millimeter thicker. What that meant was when we put the piston on, if I had put the piston on and put the engine back together and run that engine, the piston would be 1 millimeter above the top of the cylinder itself. It means it's going to hit the bottom of the plate, the cap or top plate. And that's what you call piston slap. When you have piston slap, everything's going to come apart eventually. Something's going to break at 7,000 RPM when the crank is going up and down. When the crank's turning and the piston's going up and down, it's slapping the bottom of the cap, which causes catastrophic failure. So I had to order a 2001 Pro X crank, send it to Texas. He put it on, spec'd it out. I give him the numbers off the Pro X piston, and he said that's going to work. So we got it back home along with the cylinder. And, well, let me get the cylinder out. I can say that Rat Racing, they are reasonable priced. and they did do a good job on it. If you can see that in there, I mean, it's nickel sealed. He got the power valve out because that bolt right there was holding everything in. He got it all out, sent my parts back to me, and he chamfered the ports, so the ports are in good shape. But I will say Rat Racing has done a good job, but the true test is when it's back together and the engine is running, and we see how it does with the break-in if nothing fails. So without further ado, that's the latest update. I'm going to start putting the crank. Looks like I'm doing surgery up here. I got my crank puller. We don't need that anyway. Got all my gears, got all my tools laid out on the right side. I'm going to put this in the right side of the crank. I got to put all the gears back in, grease everything up. It's got to be greased, and then we'll put this thing back together. You may see, I'm going to put this in time lapse. You'll probably see me referring to my iPad over here because I've got the blueprint of the engine transmission, and I did take photographs. When I took the engine apart, I took photographs of everything before it took it out, and so that way if I forget something, I can make sure I put it back in right. And without further ado, we'll get started. All right, folks. Finally got this engine back together. It's been a long afternoon. Uh, it has not been easy as it just looked in the last few minutes that you watched. Actually, to make a confession, I had put the crank in backwards the first time, so I had to take the engine apart, flip the crank around, and stick it back in there. What I thought would took me about an hour has took me all afternoon because I run into different problems. I had a bearing get seized up, and then the gearing, the right side of the housing, or the back side of the housing, I should say, wasn't settling down on the gearing, and I got to looking in there, and I had the gear in there wrong. So straighten that back out, and then once I got it started going, once you get that thing going, it's going to crank it right on down like you just seen. So as far as the engine is partly back together. We still got to do the right side clutch and all the gearing components that go with the clutch side. Then come back over here and do the stator side, put the stator in. We still got to get the top in, the crank in, and the V4, my mind just went blank on me. Got to get the power valve back in, and all that good stuff. So anyway, with that, we'll sign off from Big O's Moto. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like my video, subscribe if you're not a subscriber. If you don't know how to subscribe, then I'll tell you you need to get a YouTube account or register with YouTube, and that way you can subscribe to channels and like channels. But anyway, I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas. Signing off from Big O's Moto, making two strokes great again.